My name is Emily Harper. I'm 37, and just last week, I walked into a professional gala where I was set to be honored for my relentless work in research and education. It was supposed to be my night, a culmination of years of blood, sweat, and defiance. I'd been counting down the days, imagining the moment I'd stand under those lights, celebrated for everything I'd clawed my way to achieve. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. The second I slipped into the restroom to catch my breath, the air shifted. There she was, my mother, standing at the sink, reapplying her lipstick with the poised elegance of the high society queen she'd always been. 15 years had passed since I'd last seen her. And yet there she stood, untouched by time, a ghost from a past I'd buried deep. I froze, praying she wouldn't notice me. But then her eyes flicked up to the mirror, locking onto my reflection. Her hand stilled, lipstick hovering midair, and I saw her jaw clench. "Emily," she said, her voice icy, detached, like we just crossed paths at some trivial charity brunch. Not after a decade and a half of silence. "I didn't expect you here." I gripped my clutch tighter, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I could say the same," I shot back. "What brings you here?" She turned to face me, her posture stiff as steel. "Your father and I were invited, naturally. We've always supported education initiatives." Her words were clipped, rehearsed. I met her gaze. Unflinching. "I'm being honored tonight. For my work in research." A flicker of something surprise, maybe, crossed her face before she smothered it. "I see," she said, turning back to the mirror. "Well, I suppose everyone finds their path eventually." Those words hit like a punch, dragging me back to the night I walked out of their house at 19. High school had been a nightmare, depression gnawing at me while I drowned under the weight of their expectations. I tried to tell her once, to crack open the suffocating silence, but she'd snapped. "What could you possibly be sad about? You have everything, more than most. Stop making excuses." To her, I wasn't struggling, I was weak. By junior year, my grades tanked. Senior year, I was hanging by a thread. When I only got into a community college, my father's rage erupted. "This family has standards," he'd roared, pacing the living room as I clutched that crumpled acceptance letter. "You've dragged us down. If you want to throw your life away, do it alone." That night, they cut me loose. I slung a duffel bag over my shoulder and left, the door slamming shut behind me. My mother didn't even look up from her phone. My father vanished into his study. I was invisible, erased from their perfect world. For weeks, I crashed on a friend's couch, piecing together a plan. Community college wasn't the dream, but it was mine. I slung hash at a diner to pay tuition, scraping by until I could afford a dingy studio apartment. It was a brutal grind, classes, shifts, and the constant echo of their rejection, but for the first time, I could breathe. Away from their judgment, a spark flickered inside me. I threw myself into chemistry, not just to survive, but to prove something. My first exam was a battlefield. Weeks of late nights, formulas drilled into my skull. When the professor slid that graded paper back, 92%, I nearly broke down. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. A foothold. From there, I clawed my way up. Community college became a stepping stone to a 4-year university. The scared girl who'd barely scraped by transformed into someone who could command a classroom, unravel complex reactions, and hold her own. Chemistry wasn't just a subject anymore. It was my rebellion. Internships at research labs turned into a gig at a nonprofit, where I became a lead researcher. Building a space for kids like me, once told they'd never amount to anything. Graduating with my bachelor's should have been a triumph, but my parents didn't call. No congratulations. No questions, just silence. My father, head of a sprawling fertilizer empire, swam in wealth, hosting lavish parties in their mansion while I remained a ghost to them. The only one who showed up was Aunt Clara, my mother's eccentric younger sister. Shunned by the family for her free spirit, she was the only light in that darkness. She waved wildly from the crowd at my ceremony, then met me in the parking lot with flowers and a fierce hug. "You did it, kid," she said, beaming. "I'm so damn proud." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Months later, my professor, Dr. Bennett, cornered me after a project. "Emily," he said, voice low, "Oxford's offering a research spot in environmental chemistry. You're the one for it." "Oxford? Me?" He pushed me to apply, insisting I'd earned it. When the acceptance email came, "We're pleased to offer you a grant," I bolted to England, telling no one but Clara. She cheered me on. "Go, Emily. Do it for you." I vanished from their radar, starting fresh in a cramped Oxford flat. The work was brutal culture shock, isolation, but I thrived. My master's flowed into a PhD, years of sleepless nights and lab marathons. Then Cambridge called, offering me a professorship. From a community college reject to a Cambridge professor, every step was a middle finger to the past. Back in that bathroom, my mother's cool dismissal reignited old wounds. Everyone finds their way eventually, she'd said, like my journey was a fluke. She glided out, leaving me staring at my reflection, the gallows hum seeping through the walls. I steadied myself and returned to the crowd. The moment came. Emily Harper, honored for her groundbreaking contributions to education and sustainable chemistry. The applause roared, but my chest felt hollow. Then the bombshell dropped. An anonymous donor has pledged $2 million to tonight's recipient. The room hushed. My pulse spiked. $2 million? For me? But then I saw him, my father, near the exit. His face twisted in disgust as he locked eyes with me, then stormed out. My stomach dropped. The host continued. This grant comes from Mosaic Fertilizers, led by a titan in the industry. Mosaic. His company. The air thickened. The man who'd disowned me, who'd spat venom when I dared to fail, had unknowingly funded my triumph. The irony was a knife in my gut. I stumbled through a shaky thank you and fled the stage, adrenaline surging. He couldn't just walk away, not now. I bolted outside, spotting him by his car. Dad, I shouted, voice cracking. He turned, his face a mask of contempt. What, Emily? Expecting applause, he sneered. Taking my money, guess that's your game. I stepped closer, trembling but firm. I didn't ask for this. I earned it, without you. His eyes narrowed. You're still the failure I threw out. No award changes that. I turned away, his words echoing but powerless. He didn't get it. He never would. By morning, I made up my mind. That $2 million wasn't victory, it was baggage. I donated it all, every cent, to scholarships for kids like me, the overlooked and underestimated. As I hit submit, a quiet peace settled in. I didn't need his money or his pride. I'd built my own legacy, one that would outshine his shadow forever.